I've saved my progress as TrajanType.ai found inside the OA type folder. And in this exercise, I'm going to introduce you to a grab bag of shortcuts that allow you to incrementally change attributes such as type size and leading and kerning and tracking. Because after all, you rarely know what size and leading and kerning and tracking values you want to use. So I'm going to start by selecting my headline, and I'm going to move it into more or less the right position. So I'm going to drag it by its point. That gives you the most alignment control. I'm going to drag that anchor point at the outset of my point text so that it snaps into alignment with the top left corner of that margin guide. Then I'm going to double click on my black arrow tool to bring up the move dialog box, and these values are totally wrong. So I'm going to zero them out for a moment. 0 for horizontal, 0 for vertical. Then I'll shift tab back to the vertical option, and I'm going to change this value to 49 point. And that will go ahead and move my text downward with a little room to spare at the top, because we're going to make that text slightly bigger, as you're about to see. And because it's a positive vertical value, it moves the text down. I'll go ahead and click OK in order to accept that modification. And now let's zoom in on the page just a little bit by Control Spacebar clicking or Command Spacebar clicking on the Mac. And I'm getting tired of those rulers, so I'm going to press Control R, Command R on the Mac. And I want to go ahead and increase the size of that first line of type. And just so I can see what I'm doing, I'm going to collapse my character panel, which I can also do by pressing Control T, Command T on the Mac. And for what it's worth, I can see a few formatting attributes listed up here in the control panel. I can also click on the word character to get to the other character attributes. All right, so notice that project placed. That line of text pretty much exactly fills up the width of my margin. So it's pretty darn good as it is. However, my first line of type needs to be bigger. So I'm going to go ahead and double click inside of that first line in order to switch from the black arrow tool to the type tool and position my blinking insertion marker. And then I'm going to triple click in that first line of type to select the entire thing. No more. I don't need to drag anywhere. And then I want to experiment with a different size value. Well, what you can do is you can press Control-Shift greater than, which is Control-Shift period. That's also Command-Shift period on the Mac. And that increases the size of the type incrementally, as you see me doing here. If you want to make the type smaller, then you press Control-Shift comma. That's Control-Shift less than sign here on an American keyboard, or Command-Shift less than sign on the Mac. Now, by default, I think our increments are way too big. We're changing the size of the font in 2-point increments, which lacks finesse. So thankfully, I have control over those increments here inside of Illustrator. I'll press Control-K or Command-K on the Mac to bring up the Preferences dialog box. And then I'm going to switch from General to Type. And notice my size leading increment is listed right there. I've also have a tracking increment and a baseline shift. If you trust my wisdom, and I think you should, then go ahead and change that size leading value to 0.5 point. Because once again, you can't go any smaller than this increment, but you can go larger by adding another key. So if you want to move slowly, you press one shortcut. If you want to move quickly, you press a different shortcut. Pressing the Tab key advances you to the tracking value. And this value controls both kerning and tracking. And notice it's measured in thousandths of an M space. Now, an M is a blank space that measures exactly as wide as the active type size. So if you're working with, in our case, up here in the control panel, I can see I've got 60-point type. Then an M space is going to be 60 points wide. You then divide that by 1,000 and multiply it times whatever the tracking value is here. So 2 1,000ths would be 2 100ths or 1/50th of an M. That sounds very dinky, but bear in mind an M can be whoppingly huge, like 60 points, for example. So in our case, 1/50th of an M space is more than a single point. And to move characters apart from each other, 1 point is a pretty big thing. So I suggest you take this tracking value down to 5. And then tab your way to baseline shift. Baseline shift is the offset between the bottom of a character of type and the baseline. So you can move type up and down with respect to the baseline if you like. And I also recommend you set this to 0.5, just like the size leading value. So 0.5, 5, and 0.5 for these numerical values here inside the type panel. Click OK. And now notice if I press Control-Shift greater than sign or Command-Shift greater than sign on the Mac, then I increase my size value in 0.5 point increments. If I press Control-Shift less than or Command-Shift less than on the Mac, I decrease that size value in 0.5 point increments. If you want to increase or decrease the size value 5 times that amount, so 2.5 points in our case, then you would add the Alt or Option key. So in other words, it's a mash your fist. Control-Shift-Alt greater than sign to increase the size of the text 2.5 points. Control-Shift-Alt less than sign. In order to decrease the size of that text, that's Command-Shift-Option greater than sign or Command-Shift-Option less than sign. Okay, so in my case, I'm going to go ahead and press Control-Shift-Alt greater than sign or Command-Shift-Option greater than sign to take the type size value up to 62.5, and then I'm going to press Control-Shift or Command-Shift greater than sign to take it up to 63 points. So I want that first line of type to be 63 points as you see it now. That may surprise you a little bit, but the reason we're going with 63 points is we need to apply a little bit of kerning, and I'm going to show you a few ways to adjust leading and kerning in the very next exercise.